My name is Robert Henderson, and at 58 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of betrayal life could throw at me. I was wrong. The day my own daughter looked me straight in the eye and screamed, "Pay your rent or get out of my house," changed everything. What she didn't know was that I had been paying the mortgage on that house for 15 years. What happened next would teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. Before I tell you how this all unfolded, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had family turn on you when you needed them most. Hit that like button if you're ready for a story about justice served cold. And don't forget to subscribe because you won't believe how this ends. You know, people always say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes I wonder if they've ever had their own blood turn against them. My story starts 30 years ago when I was a young construction foreman, just 28 years old, working my tail off to build a life for my family. I spent decades pouring concrete, framing houses, and managing crews, working 60-hour weeks even in the dead of winter. Every blister on my hands, every ache in my back, it was all for one person, my daughter Jessica. When Jessica's mother died in that car accident back in 2003, Jessica was only 12 years old. I became both mom and dad overnight. I missed countless baseball games because I was working overtime. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch for years, so Jessica could have name-brand clothes for school. I never remarried, never took vacations, never bought anything for myself that wasn't absolutely necessary. Everything I did was for her future. In 2008, when Jessica was 17 and thinking about her senior year, she fell in love with this beautiful 4-bedroom colonial house in Maple Grove. It had everything she dreamed of. A big backyard, 3 bathrooms, and it was in the best school district in town. The asking price was $350,000, which was way more than I could afford on a foreman's salary. But when I saw how her eyes lit up walking through those rooms, I knew I had to make it happen. I put down every penny I had saved, took out a 30-year mortgage that would stretch me thin for decades, and bought that house. Not for me, mind you. I could have been happy in a small apartment. I bought it because Jessica said she wanted to finish high school there and maybe live there during college. It was her dream home, so I made it mine too. Those first few years were tough, but we made it work. Jessica graduated high school, though college didn't quite pan out the way we hoped. She tried community college for 2 semesters before dropping out. Then she bounced between jobs. Retail, waitressing, a brief stint at a dental office. I never pressured her about it. I figured she was still figuring herself out. Then she met Marcus in 2018. He seemed charming enough at first, always polite when he came around, helped with yard work occasionally. He had this easy smile and talked a good game about his plans for the future. Jessica was head over heels, and honestly, I was just happy to see her happy. After her mother's death, she had struggled with relationships, never quite trusting people to stick around. By 2021, Jessica was pregnant with twins, and Marcus had lost his job at the auto parts store. They were stressed about money, living in a cramped apartment, and Jessica was having a difficult pregnancy. That's when I made what I thought was a temporary arrangement. I told them they could move into the house while I found a smaller place. Just until they got back on their feet, you understand. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment across town. It was 800 square feet of beige walls and thin carpet, but I told myself it was temporary. Jessica and Marcus would pay the utilities and basic upkeep on the house, and I'd keep covering the mortgage payments. It seemed fair at the time. They needed space for the babies, and I wanted to help my daughter during a difficult time. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly temporary became permanent in their minds. What I also didn't expect was how hard it would be for me to make ends meet. The mortgage on the house was still $1,800 a month, plus insurance and property taxes. My apartment rent was another $900. On my construction pension and the occasional handyman job, I was barely scraping by. I started eating beans and rice most nights. I bought generic everything at the grocery store. I stopped going out with my old work buddies because I couldn't afford to buy a round of beers. Some months, I had to choose between buying groceries and getting my blood pressure medication. I never told Jessica about any of this. A father doesn't burden his children with his problems, right? The twins, Emma and Ethan, were born healthy and beautiful. I remember holding them in the hospital, thinking about all the ways I wanted to spoil them, all the things I wanted to teach them. But as they grew, I noticed something troubling. Jessica and Marcus weren't exactly encouraging a relationship between the kids and their grandfather. My visits became less frequent. shorter, more formal. The first real sign that something was wrong came about 6 months ago. I had noticed the kitchen faucet was leaking during my last visit, so I drove over on a Saturday morning with my toolbox to fix it. Nothing fancy, just a simple repair that would take maybe 30 minutes. I had my own key, of course, since it was my house, and I'd always just let myself in to do maintenance work. But when I walked into the basement to shut off the water, I couldn't believe what I saw. Marcus had completely transformed the space into what he called his man cave. There was a 65-inch television mounted on the wall, a leather sectional that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 6 months, and a sound system that could wake the dead. The walls were painted black and red, with neon beer signs hanging everywhere. He had a pool table, a mini fridge stocked with craft beer, and gaming equipment that looked like it belonged in a NASA control room. I stood there calculating in my head. This setup had to cost at least $15,000, maybe $20,000. Meanwhile, upstairs, the house was falling apart in ways I couldn't afford to fix. The front porch steps were loose and dangerous. The gutters needed cleaning and repair. The paint was peeling on the north side where the weather hit hardest. But down here in the basement, Marcus was living like a king. When I came back upstairs, Marcus was in the kitchen making coffee. He looked at my toolbox with this expression I'd never seen before: annoyance. Not gratitude that his father-in-law was fixing things for free, but irritation that I was there at all. "Bob," he said, not even looking at me, "you really should call before you come over. This is our home now, and we value our privacy." Our home. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been making mortgage payments on this house for 13 years, and he was talking about privacy. I tried to brush it off, focus on the repair work. But something had shifted. The dynamic was changing, and not in my favor. Over the next few months, the pattern became clearer. Jessica would only call me when something was broken. Not to chat, not to invite me for dinner, not to see how I was doing. Just when she needed free labor. The washing machine was making noise. The garage door was sticking. The bathroom tile was loose. I was becoming nothing more than a handyman to my own daughter. My 58th birthday came and went without so much as a phone call from Jessica. But I saw on her Facebook page that they'd thrown a huge party the weekend before for one of Marcus's buddies from his old job. Catered food, a DJ, decorations everywhere. The same house where I wasn't worth a birthday acknowledgement had been turned into a party venue for a stranger. That hurt more than I care to admit. I sat in my tiny apartment that night, eating a gas station cupcake I'd bought for myself, wondering how I'd raised a daughter who could forget her father's birthday but remember every friend of her husband's. Around the same time, my work started drying up. Being 58 in construction isn't easy. Younger guys can work faster, lift more, and frankly, most homeowners assume they know more about modern techniques. My handyman jobs went from 3 or 4 a week to maybe 1 every 2 weeks. The mortgage payments became even more of a struggle. I had a minor heart episode in October. Nothing major, the doctor said, but a warning sign. I was working on a deck renovation when my chest got tight, and I had trouble catching my breath. Spent 4 hours in the emergency room getting tests run, walked out with a prescription for heart medication and a bill for $3,000. I never told Jessica about it. What would be the point? She had her own family to worry about, and I didn't want to be a burden. But lying in that hospital bed, I realized I had no emergency contact except her, and she probably wouldn't even answer if the hospital called. That's when I started thinking seriously about what would happen to the house if something happened to me. Jessica and Marcus were living there like they owned it, but legally it was still mine. If I died tomorrow, would she even be able to keep making the payments? Did she understand that the mortgage wasn't paid off? That someone would have to take responsibility for $1,800 a month plus taxes and insurance? I tried to bring it up during one of my repair visits in November. Jessica was in the kitchen while I fixed a cabinet door that had come off its hinges. I said something about maybe sitting down to talk about the house situation, about making things more official, about planning for the future. She barely looked up from her phone. "Dad, we'll figure it out later. We're busy right now with the kids and everything. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it." I was carrying 2 mortgages, eating 1 meal a day some weeks, and she told me not to worry about it. That conversation, or lack thereof, was the beginning of the end of my patience. The explosion came on a cold Saturday morning in December. I'd noticed during my last visit that the front porch steps were getting dangerous. One of the boards was completely loose, and I was worried that Jessica or one of the kids might fall through. I'd been putting off the repair because lumber was expensive, but I finally scraped together enough money to buy the materials. I loaded my truck with 2x8s, deck screws, and my tools, and drove over around 9 in the morning. It was early, but I wanted to get the work done before the weather turned bad. I used my key to get into the garage for some additional tools I'd left there, then started carrying lumber to the front porch. That's when Marcus came out of the house like a man possessed. He was still in his pajamas, his hair a mess, but his face was red with anger. "What the hell are you doing here, Bob?" he shouted loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "You can't just show up whenever you want anymore." I tried to explain about the dangerous steps, how someone could get hurt, but he cut me off. "You should have called first. This is our house, and you're trespassing." Trespassing. On the property I'd been paying for since 2008. I felt my blood pressure rising, but I tried to stay calm. "Marcus, I'm just trying to fix the steps before someone gets hurt. It'll take me an hour, maybe 2. "I don't care what you're trying to do," he said, getting closer to me, his voice getting louder. "You don't live here anymore. You can't just come and go as you please. We have a life here, a routine, and you're disrupting it." By now, Jessica had come outside, and I hoped she'd be the voice of reason. She'd grown up in this house, remembered all the work I'd put into it over the years. Surely she'd understand. But the look on her face wasn't understanding. It was cold, calculating, like she'd been preparing for this conversation. "Dad," she said, crossing her arms. "Marcus is right. This arrangement we have isn't working anymore. We need to establish some boundaries. Boundaries. With my own daughter. In the house I was paying for." "What kind of boundaries are we talking about, Jessica?" She glanced at Marcus, like she needed his approval to continue. "We've been talking about this for months. If you want to keep coming around, if you want access to the house, then you need to start contributing properly. You need to pay rent." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "Pay rent?" $800 a month, Marcus jumped in, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Plus a security deposit. First month due today if you want to keep your tools in the garage, and have access for repairs." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised, whose college I'd tried to pay for, whose wedding I'd funded, whose children I'd helped bring into the world. "Jessica, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious, Dad. We're adults now, with adult responsibilities. We can't keep subsidizing your lifestyle." Subsidizing my lifestyle. I was living in a one-bedroom apartment, eating generic cereal for dinner, and she thought I was living large. "Honey, I think there's been some misunderstanding about the house situation." "There's no misunderstanding," she interrupted. "We live here, we maintain it, we've made it our home. If you want to be part of that, you need to contribute fairly." That's when Marcus decided to twist the knife. "Honestly, Bob, it's pretty entitled of you to expect us to support you at our age. We're trying to build something here, and you're just taking advantage of our generosity." Taking advantage of their generosity. In the house I owned. With the mortgage I was paying. I tried one more time to explain. "Jessica, I need to tell you something about this house." "I don't want to hear excuses, Dad," she exploded. The volume of her voice shocked me. The twins were watching through the front window now, their faces pressed against the glass. "I'm tired of you acting like you're doing us some big favor by fixing things around here. This is what family does for each other." "But sweetheart, you don't understand. The house. Pay the rent, or get out," she screamed, her face red, her finger pointing at me like I was a stranger she was evicting. "I'm done with this conversation. Either you start acting like a responsible tenant, or you find somewhere else to store your tools and spend your time." The neighbors were definitely watching now. Mrs. Patterson from next door was standing in her yard, not even pretending she wasn't listening. The Johnsons across the street had come out to get their mail and were taking their sweet time about it. Marcus stepped forward and started gathering my tools from the porch. "I think you should leave now, Bob. Come back when you're ready to have an adult conversation about your responsibilities." "My responsibilities." I stood there for a moment, watching my son-in-law pack up my tools, watching my daughter cross her arms and stare at me like I was a problem she needed to solve. The grandchildren were still at the window, confused about why Grandpa was being yelled at. I loaded my tools back into the truck in complete silence. Jessica and Marcus went back into the house without another word. I drove away from that house, the house I'd bought for my daughter's dreams, feeling smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. That night, sitting in my apartment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that I couldn't afford to fix, I made a decision. I was done being treated like a charity case by my own family. I was done being grateful for scraps of attention from the daughter I'd sacrificed everything for. It was time to teach Jessica and Marcus a lesson about responsibility, about ownership, and about what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. The morning after that humiliating confrontation, I didn't sleep much. I kept replaying Jessica's words in my head. Pay the rent or get out. The venom in her voice, the way she looked at me like I was some deadbeat taking advantage of her generosity. It was eating me alive. But somewhere around 4 in the morning, lying in my narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, something shifted inside me. The hurt started turning into something else. Clarity. For the first time in years, I could see the situation for what it really was. I wasn't the problem here. I was the solution to a problem Jessica and Marcus didn't even know they had. I got up, made a pot of coffee, and sat down with a yellow legal pad. I started writing down everything I could remember about the house. When I bought it, how much I paid, what I still owed, what it might be worth now. The numbers were eye-opening. By Monday morning, I was sitting in the waiting room of Henderson and Associates, a family law firm I'd found online. The lawyer, Cheryl Matthews, was probably in her 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded me of my late wife. "Mr. Henderson," she said after I'd explained my situation, "let me make sure I understand this correctly. You own the house outright? You're on the deed, you're responsible for the mortgage, but your daughter and her family are living there without paying rent?" "That's right. We had an informal arrangement, but it's gotten out of hand." She pulled out a calculator and started punching numbers. "And they're demanding you pay them rent to access your own property?" $800 a month, plus a security deposit." Cheryl shook her head. "Mr. Henderson, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your daughter and son-in-law may have committed fraud. If they've been representing themselves as the homeowners to neighbors, creditors, or financial institutions, that's a serious legal issue." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we should run a credit check on the property address, see if anyone has tried to take out loans using the house as collateral. It happens more often than you'd think in situations like this." 2 hours later, Cheryl had the results. Jessica and Marcus had indeed applied for a home equity line of credit 6 months earlier, claiming to be the sole owners of the property. The application had been denied because the credit check revealed my name as the actual mortgage holder, but the attempt was documented. "They tried to borrow against your house," Cheryl explained, $50,000. When the bank called to verify ownership, the phone number they provided went to a disconnected line. I felt sick. My own daughter had tried to steal from me, to use my property as collateral for their debt, and when that didn't work, they decided to start charging me rent instead. "What are my options?" I asked. "Legally, you could evict them tomorrow. They're essentially squatters at this point. But..." She paused, studying my face. "There might be a more elegant solution. Have you considered selling the property?" Selling. The thought had crossed my mind, but I'd always dismissed it. The house was Jessica's childhood home, where she'd brought her own children. But now, thinking about it practically, it made perfect sense. What would it be worth? In this market, in that neighborhood? Probably $800,000, maybe more. I can recommend a good realtor if you're interested. $800,000. After paying off the remaining $60,000 on my mortgage, I'd have enough money to buy a nice place of my own, maybe even have something left over for retirement. For the first time in years, I could see a future that didn't involve struggling to make ends meet. By Wednesday, I was meeting with Dolores Franklin, the realtor Cheryl had recommended. Dolores was a sharp woman in her 60s who'd been selling houses in the area for 30 years. She walked through the property while Jessica and Marcus were at work, making notes and taking photos. "Your daughter has good taste," she said, admiring some of the decorative touches Jessica had added over the years. "But the house needs work. New roof, updated electrical, some foundation repairs. In its current condition, I'd estimate $750,000 to $800,000. How quickly could we close a sale? In this market? With the right buyer, 30 days, maybe less if you're flexible on price. That evening, I sat in my apartment and really thought about what I was considering. Selling the house would end my relationship with Jessica, at least temporarily. It would disrupt my grandchildren's lives. It would cause a lot of pain and chaos. But it would also teach Jessica and Marcus a lesson they desperately needed to learn. They couldn't treat people like garbage and expect no consequences. They couldn't live for free while demanding rent from the person subsidizing their lifestyle. Most importantly, they couldn't commit fraud and intimidate me into accepting their abuse. I called Jessica one more time, hoping against hope that she'd come to her senses, maybe apologize for how she'd treated me. The phone rang 4 times before she answered. "What do you want, Dad?" Not "Hi, Dad," or "How are you feeling after the other day?" Just "What do you want?" Like I was a telemarketer. "I wanted to talk about what happened on Saturday. I think we need to clear the air." "There's nothing to clear. I told you what needs to happen. Are you ready to pay rent or not?" "Jessica, if you would just listen to me for 5 minutes, I can explain about the house." "I don't have time for this, Dad. Emma has soccer practice, and I still need to make dinner. Either you're ready to be a responsible tenant, or you need to find somewhere else to hang out." She hung up on me. My own daughter hung up on me. Friday morning, I signed the listing agreement with Dolores. The house would go on the market the following Monday, with showings scheduled only during weekday business hours when Jessica and Marcus would be at work. I wanted to give buyers a chance to see the property without the chaos of a family confrontation. That weekend was the longest of my life. I kept picking up the phone to call Jessica, to warn her what was coming, to give her one last chance to make things right. But every time I started dialing, I remembered her voice. Pay the rent or get out. I remembered Marcus gathering my tools like I was trespassing. I remembered the look of disgust on her face when I tried to explain. No, they'd made their choice. Now they'd have to live with the consequences. Monday morning, Dolores listed the house online at $775,000. By noon, she'd fielded 6 phone calls from interested buyers. By Wednesday, we had 3 serious offers, all within $5,000 of the asking price. The winning bid came from a young military family, Staff Sergeant Michael Torres and his wife Carmen, with 2 kids aged 5 and 7. They were being transferred to the local Air Force base and needed to close quickly. They offered the full asking price and could close in 3 weeks. I liked them immediately. Michael reminded me of myself at that age, hardworking, devoted to his family, wanting to provide a stable home for his children. Carmen was a nurse who'd be working at the base hospital. They had the same dreams I'd had when I bought the house for Jessica. A safe neighborhood, good schools, a place to build a life. During those 3 weeks, I started making changes in my own life. I used part of my savings to put a deposit on a beautiful 2-bedroom condo overlooking Mirror Lake. It was in a community designed for active seniors, with a fitness center, walking trails, and social activities. For the first time in years, I was excited about where I lived. I also started dating again. Gloria Patterson, a widow I'd met at the community center during a grief support group, had been gently flirting with me for months. I'd always been too stressed about money to consider a relationship, but now I asked her out for dinner. She was kind, funny, and best of all, she treated me with respect. The whole time, I kept expecting Jessica to call. The realtor had put a for sale sign in the front yard, and I figured it was only a matter of time before she noticed. But days passed, then weeks, and my phone stayed silent. Cheryl explained later that Jessica and Marcus had probably gotten used to ignoring real estate signs in the neighborhood. "People see what they expect to see," she said. They were so convinced they lived in their own house that they probably assumed the sign was for a different property. The closing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I dressed in my best suit, the one I'd worn to Jessica's wedding, and met the Torres family at the title company. Watching them sign the papers, seeing the excitement on their children's faces as they talked about their new bedrooms, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: pride. I wasn't just selling a house. I was passing it on to a family who would appreciate it, who would take care of it, who wouldn't take it for granted. Michael shook my hand after signing the final document and thanked me for making their dream possible. Carmen hugged me and promised to send photos once they'd settled in. When the title officer handed me the check for $784,000, After all fees and the mortgage payoff, I stared at it for a full minute. I'd never seen that much money with my name on it. For the first time in my adult life, I was financially secure. That afternoon, I deposited the check and immediately transferred money for my new condo. I bought groceries without looking at prices. I went to a nice restaurant and ordered whatever I wanted. I bought Gloria flowers and took her out for a celebration dinner, though I didn't tell her what we were celebrating yet. For 3 weeks, I lived in a state of peaceful anticipation. I knew the reckoning was coming, but I was no longer afraid of it. I'd spent years being afraid. Afraid of disappointing Jessica. Afraid of being a burden. Afraid of standing up for myself. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready for my daughter to learn the truth. The call came on a Tuesday morning at 7:36. I was having coffee on my new condo's balcony, watching the sunrise over the lake, when my phone started ringing. Jessica's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time in months, I smiled before answering. "Hello, Jessica." "Dad!" Her voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "There are people at our house. They're saying they bought it. They have keys. They're telling us we have to leave." I took a sip of my coffee, savoring both the taste and the moment. "Is that so? This has to be some kind of mistake. Some kind of scam. Dad, you have to come over here right now and fix this." Even in crisis, she was giving me orders, expecting me to drop everything and solve her problems. Some things never change. "I don't think there's been a mistake, sweetheart." "What do you mean? Of course there's been a mistake. We live here. This is our house." "Actually, Jessica, it was my house, and I sold it." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "What did you just say?" "I said I sold the house. 3 weeks ago. The new owners, the Torres family, are moving in today." "That's impossible. You can't sell our house. We live here." "It was never your house, Jessica. I bought it in 2008. I've been paying the mortgage for 15 years, and my name is the only one on the deed. I tried to explain this to you several times, but you weren't interested in listening." I could hear Marcus shouting in the background, something about lawyers and illegal evictions. Jessica was crying now, that ugly crying sound that takes me back to when she was a little girl with a scraped knee. "But Dad, where are we supposed to go? The kids' school? Their friends? Everything is here." "I imagine you'll figure something out. You're adults now, with adult responsibilities. Isn't that what you told me? This is different. We have children." "Yes, you do. And now you'll have to provide for them the way I provided for you. By working. By making sacrifices. By putting your children's needs before your own wants." Marcus grabbed the phone. "Bob, this is illegal. You can't just kick us out without notice. We'll sue you for everything you're worth." I chuckled at that. "Marcus, you might want to talk to a lawyer before you start making threats. Cheryl Matthews at Henderson & Associates has some interesting documentation about your attempts to use my house as collateral for loans. Fraud is a serious crime." The phone went quiet again. I could picture Marcus's face, the realization dawning that their little scheme hadn't gone unnoticed. Jessica got back on the phone. "Dad, please." "We're family. You can't do this to your own grandchildren." "Family," I repeated. "Is that what we are? Because when I tried to fix your dangerous front steps, you screamed at me to pay rent or get out. When I tried to explain about the house, you hung up on me. When I needed support, you treated me like a burden." "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did. You meant every word. And now you're experiencing the consequences of treating people badly." Over the next hour, my phone rang constantly. Jessica called 4 more times, each conversation following the same pattern: shock, denial, anger, bargaining, then hanging up when I refused to fix the situation for her. Marcus called twice, alternating between threats and attempts at negotiation. "Look, Bob, maybe we can work something out. We could pay you rent on the new place, wherever the Torres family lives now." "Marcus, the Torres family bought the house. They're moving in today. There is no new place for them. There is no negotiation. You have until 5 o'clock to remove your belongings, or they'll be considered abandoned property." By noon, the whole neighborhood was buzzing with activity. I drove by around lunchtime, just to see how things were progressing. There were 2 moving trucks in the driveway, and Jessica's friends were helping carry furniture out to a smaller truck. The Torres family was there too, waiting patiently for their new home to be vacated. Mrs. Patterson from next door waved me over. "Bob, I heard about what happened. I have to say, I'm not surprised. That son-in-law of yours has been bragging for months about his house and all the renovations he was planning. I always wondered how they could afford such a nice place on their salaries." "People sometimes get confused about what belongs to them," I said diplomatically. "Well, I for one am glad to see a nice military family moving in. They'll take better care of the property than those 2 ever did." By 3 o'clock, Jessica called one more time. Her voice was different now. Smaller, defeated, but also angry in a way I'd never heard before. "I hope you're happy, Dad. I hope destroying your grandchildren's lives was worth whatever point you were trying to make." "I didn't destroy anything, Jessica. I stopped enabling your destruction of our relationship. There's a difference. We have nowhere to go. We're going to have to live in a motel until we can find an apartment that will take us with no notice." "That sounds difficult. But you're resourceful people. You'll figure it out." "How can you be so cold? These are your grandchildren we're talking about." "My grandchildren who barely know me because you've spent 2 years treating me like hired help instead of family. My grandchildren who call Marcus the man of the house while their grandfather lives in poverty to pay for their home." She was quiet for a long moment. "We didn't know you were struggling. You didn't ask. You didn't care. You saw what you wanted to see. So this is it? You're just going to abandon us?" "I'm not abandoning anyone, Jessica. I'm teaching you what you should have learned years ago. Actions have consequences, and you can't treat people badly and expect them to keep sacrificing for you. What if we apologize? What if Marcus apologizes for how he treated you?" "Apologies are a good start, but they don't undo the damage. They don't give me back the dignity you took from me, or the 3 years I spent eating 1 meal a day so you could live rent-free in a house you thought you owned." That was the last conversation we had for several months. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they'd found a 2-bedroom apartment across town, that Marcus had to get a second job to make ends meet, that Jessica was working retail again for the first time in years. I also heard that their relationship was strained. Apparently, Marcus had been under the impression that Jessica would eventually inherit the house, that it was some kind of family asset they could count on. Learning that not only was there no inheritance coming, but that they'd been living entirely on my charity had been a shock to his system. But I also heard something else, that Jessica had started to change. Without me there to fix everything, she'd had to become more self-reliant. Without the safety net of the house, she'd had to face the reality of their financial situation. 6 months after the sale, my life had transformed completely. I was living in my beautiful condo, with a view that never got old, and neighbors who actually liked having me around. Gloria and I were seeing each other regularly, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had a partner rather than someone I needed to take care of. My health had improved dramatically. The stress of carrying 2 housing payments and constantly worrying about money had been literally killing me. My doctor was amazed at how much my blood pressure had improved, how much more energy I had. I'd also started volunteering at a local organization that helped seniors with home repairs. It felt good to use my skills to help people who appreciated the work, who said thank you instead of demanding more. But the best part was the peace. For years, I'd carried this constant anxiety about Jessica, about whether I was doing enough, giving enough, sacrificing enough. That weight was gone. I'd done everything I could as a father, and the rest was up to her. The first sign that Jessica was changing came through Emma and Ethan. Jessica had started bringing them to the McDonald's near my condo on Saturday mornings, letting them play in the playground while she sat at a table looking exhausted. She never approached me, but she let the kids run over when they saw me. "Grandpa Bob!" Emma had shouted one morning, throwing her arms around my legs. "Mommy says you live in a castle now." "Not quite a castle," I laughed. "But it's a nice place. Would you like to see it sometime?" "Can we, Mommy?" Ethan asked, running over to Jessica's table. Jessica looked at me for a long moment. She'd lost weight, and there were circles under her eyes, but there was something different in her expression. Less entitlement, maybe. More humility. "Maybe sometime," she said quietly. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The real breakthrough came 2 months later. Jessica called me on a Thursday evening, and for the first time in our relationship, she didn't want anything. "Hi, Dad. I just wanted to see how you're doing." "I'm doing well, sweetheart. How are you and the kids?" "We're okay, adjusting. It's been hard, but we're managing." We talked for 20 minutes about ordinary things. The kids' school, the weather, Gloria's garden. It was the most normal conversation we'd had in years. At the end, Jessica said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Dad, I owe you an apology." "Oh?" "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and I realize I was wrong. Not just about the house, but about how I treated you. You sacrificed everything for me, and I repaid you by treating you like garbage." I felt tears starting in my eyes. "Thank you for saying that, honey." "Marcus left last month." "I'm sorry to hear that." "No, you're not," she said with a bitter laugh. "And honestly, neither am I. It turns out he was only interested in the lifestyle he thought we had. When he realized we were actually going to have to work for everything, he decided he wanted to find someone with better prospects. That must have been painful." "It was, but it was also clarifying. I've spent the last few years making decisions based on what Marcus wanted, what would make him happy. I forgot about what was actually important." We started talking regularly after that. Not every day, but a few times a week. Jessica told me about her struggles as a single mother, about learning to budget and prioritize, about the humbling experience of needing help and having to ask for it. She also told me about the positive changes. She'd gotten a promotion at work because she was finally taking it seriously instead of treating it as temporary. The kids were more independent, more appreciative of what they had. They'd learned to help with household chores, to understand that money didn't grow on trees. 3 months later, Jessica asked if she and the kids could come for dinner at my condo. Gloria helped me cook, and we had a wonderful evening. The kids were fascinated by the lake view, and Jessica was genuinely complimentary about the home I'd created for myself. As we were cleaning up, Jessica pulled me aside. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "Of course." "Do you think you can ever forgive me? Really forgive me, not just say the words?" I looked at my daughter, this woman who'd caused me so much pain but who was clearly trying to become a better person. "Jessica, I forgave you the day I sold the house." "What do you mean?" "I mean, the anger was never about punishment. It was about teaching you to value what you have, to treat people with respect, to understand that everything comes with a cost. If you've learned those lessons, then the pain was worth it." "I have learned them. The hard way, but I've learned them." "Then we're good, sweetheart. We're family." Over the following months, we rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. Jessica never asked me for money, never hinted that I should help with rent or expenses. When the kids needed school supplies or wanted to join sports teams, she found ways to make it work on her own. But I did help, in small ways that felt good rather than taken for granted. I bought the kids Christmas presents, took them for weekend adventures, babysat when Jessica had to work late. The difference was that now she appreciated it, thanked me for it, reciprocated when she could. 1 year after the house sale, Jessica invited me to Emma's birthday party at their apartment. It was a small celebration, nothing fancy, but it was warm and loving in a way our family gatherings hadn't been in years. As I was leaving, Jessica walked me to my car. "Dad, I want you to know something. Losing the house was the best thing that ever happened to me." "How so?" "It forced me to grow up, to take responsibility, to appreciate what I have instead of always wanting more." She paused, looking back at the apartment building. "We're happy here. Really happy. The kids are thriving, I'm proud of the life we're building, and for the first time, I feel like I've earned what we have." That's all I ever wanted for you, honey. To be proud of yourself, to stand on your own 2 feet. I know that now, and I'm grateful, even though it took me way too long to understand. Today, 2 years after that terrible Saturday morning, when Jessica screamed at me to pay rent or get out, our relationship is stronger than it's ever been. It's built on mutual respect instead of guilt and obligation. Jessica is thriving as an independent woman and mother. The kids know their grandfather as someone who loves them, not someone who owes them anything. And me? I'm happier than I've been since my wife died. I have a beautiful home, a wonderful relationship with Gloria, grandchildren who genuinely enjoy spending time with me, and a daughter who calls because she wants to talk, not because she needs something fixed. Sometimes people ask me if I regret selling the house, if I think I was too harsh. My answer is always the same. I regret that it took so long for me to stand up for myself, but I don't regret teaching my daughter that love and respect go both ways. The house was just a building. What we built afterward, through the pain and the lessons and the forgiveness, that's a real home. And unlike the house, this one belongs to all of us equally. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to teach someone you love an important lesson? How did you find the courage to do what was right instead of what was easy? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your dignity. And don't forget to share this with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. Remember, sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's worst behavior. Sometimes you have to let people fall so they can learn to stand on their own. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way to discover what really matters. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you find the courage to value yourself the way you deserve to be valued. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember that you're worth more than you think.